There's no entanglement, right? So one of the things that makes me wonder about is maybe quantum mechanics isn't exactly what we thought. I mean, maybe there's something deeper, right? That's what the string theory guys think. So
I think consciousness has to be connected to it, a part of the quantum, right? Like that, it really does. Bob,
sorry, there was too much noise in the background. Was there a question there?
We can hear you loud and clear, brother. That's awesome.
Okay, it's just that I can't hear you, so I'm going to have to put some earphones on here.
All right, and
so just hold a second. You can look at a Japanese sign for a second here.
Amazing stuff right here. Ooh, sorry, Tim. Don't want to take you away. There we go. And while Bob is getting connected, we have.
So where is Bob? Where are you at?
I'm in about an hour and a half north of Sapporo, sorry, southeast of Sapporo at a hot spring. Yeah. And I came here to complete my thinking on geopolymers. And I think I'm going to be able to make an extremely good argument tomorrow. I grew up in a part of the UK where we have a limestone group of hills, and it's very soft.
The red limestone.
Well, it's chalk basically. It's calcium carbonate, and it's very soft, and it's got shells in it. This is the type that forms by sedimentation of shellfish and crustaceans or whatever as they die and go to the bottom. The limestone here is coming out of water that's being dissolving the calcium oxide into calcium hydroxide, and it deposits this incredibly hard substance when it combines with carbon dioxide in the air to make calcium carbonate, but it's incredibly hard limestone. So it's made into obviously almost just it's a solution of calcium hydroxide. So it's like as small as it can be. So it needs to be some process that's similar to that. And I don't know if you've been following what we've been doing, but
Megalithic limestone by chance?
It's what? Sorry, what?
Is that the process that makes the oolitic limestone where it gets the swirls put into it?
Well, I mean, it depends on the water flow. I don't know much about that. So what I'm just interested in at the moment is how could you make a
You said water flow. I was thinking EVOs that process.
Well, there's going to be EVOs underground. So one of the theories of Matsumoto, and I wanted to understand that also by coming here, is he believes that earthquakes and tornadoes and actual volcanoes are all effects caused by like macro evos. So like a macro evo is actually creating the volcano, and we've seen this in our experiments. We've literally created a sort of pseudo volcano in India, and then it spurts out silicon dioxide, and that's what he predicted. Now in our other experiments we've seen where you get a ball lightning form, and when it falls apart, it actually produces silicon dioxide and calcium oxide and iron oxide. Well, all around us here, we have basalt, and basalt is these kind of chemicals, and basalt also contains calcium oxide. So the process he's saying is causing volcanoes, and I can understand why he might think that, because he had a lot of time to contemplate it in this environment. We know that ball lightning produces these chemicals. Now, if it produces calcium oxide, it's not producing calcium carbonate, it's producing calcium oxide. And then you add water to that and you get calcium hydroxide. So exactly the process I've witnessed here today is, I believe, part of the process behind creating geopolymers. And this allows you to understand how you can make the pyramids. And I last Sunday, I was in Delphi in Greece, and I saw these huge sort of blocks of calcium carbonate carved in the Temple of Apollo with all of these multiple curves and angles, and they all slot into each other, just like you see in other megalithic structures. Not quite as big as the Tiwanaku and things like that, but it becomes rather trivial to understand these things. And if you've been following our work recently, this sacred geometry defines this technology called the wind hex. And we should have a working wind hex in Holland, probably by the 22nd. And if it does what it says on the tin, it should be able to pulverize rock down to 1 to 5, maybe up to 1 to 10 microns in an extremely small period of time. And so to this tomorrow evening, or this evening, oh God, I don't know what day you're on there, but Sunday evening, Monday morning here, I will do my normal sort of stream, and I will describe what I believe is a whole process between creating basaltic geopolymers and calcium carbonate limestone-based geopolymers. And this removes the need to have anti-gravity to produce these megalithic structures, because you make like a putty through this process, and then over a period of time the remaining calcium hydroxide that it's made of takes on carbon dioxide from the environment, and there's a way of accelerating that, which is actually used in carbon sequestration in commercially. And so I will talk about that. So these are facts that are on the table that would explain how you could create geopolymers. And whilst I saw massive millstones, which I couldn't explain for milling corn in Delphi, it could start to mill rock, but it would be a primitive way to do it than to use the wind hex type device. And when you know that the ancient civilizations had copper, they could create steam, high pressure steam. This would easily generate a wind hex system. And like here in Japan, every temple has a what I could call an auspicious symbol, because we can't call it by its more common name because it's illegal to talk about it. But the auspicious symbol is all over the world.
The worship, it's not the worship, it's the workshops that used to be at these places, and that the big stone grinding the other stone down into the powder to use, it's the key ingredient of then making the geopolymer, right? So you're showing the primitive way of how they would have been making the same high technology.
Well, yeah. So I think maybe some people would use that, but they wouldn't create so. There's something. I will include the video. There's a Russian scientist, and he went there and he did a 2-month study, and they found that the chemical makeup of the megalithic stones were exactly the same as the local quarry, but the formation of it was the same at the lower levels. That is to say, at the lower levels, they had actual blocks from the quarry, complete with inclusions and bigger and smaller grains and maybe shells and whatever else in there. But it was covered with this skim of something. And he actually went round and knocked on it, and in places it's hollow, like you put plaster on a wall and it had a crack in the wall, and you can hear the drum beat of it. But the levels 2 and 3, or 3 and 4 rather, above, were completely geopolymer. And when you analyze those, when they did it back in Russia back in 2012, they found that it was 1 to 10 micron particles, completely homogeneous, but exactly the same chemical makeup as the quarry. So the only way that could happen is if you go through some powderizing process, and then some process to make geopolymer.
Having to move that
it removed all of those things, and of course,
ground it down, then rebuilt it as a concrete.
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you, Bob, by the way, I gotta say, shame on you for making every single one of us absolutely desire, like nothing else, a wind hex. All of us want one. All of us need one. I want a little bench.
Well, but the plans are already out there. I know one's being made. I'm pretty sure one's being made in Australia right now, and there's at least one, maybe 2 being made in Holland. But the price of all of the laser files are out there. So, don't waste your money until it's verified. It's certainly, if you want to eat ground cockroaches or whatever it is they're trying to feed us right now.
The amount of materials that I need to powderize, process, and tear apart are quite extensive. And that device, for what it's doing and how it's doing it, and the time that it's doing it, makes something like a ball mill or a roller grinder.
It's a joke.
Like,
it's a total. Yeah, so I want to make soil. So I want to go to my local glass recycling bin, get a load of glass. I want to go to my wife's restaurant, who uses hundreds of eggs every week, and get the eggshells. And I want to go to the forest and pick up a load of wood that would normally take 10, 20 years to decay down into humus. And I want to throw it through a wind hex, and I've basically got a good growing medium that comes out the other end.
You couldn't get better, and you could add just as much of whatever you want in there, fully oxidized, rusted parts, and you can make basically that treasured black soil that everything grows in prolifically.
Exactly. And it doesn't take 100 years to make an inch. So just on that alone, it, for me, is transformational to human society. And then you think, well, if they did have these things in Egypt, for instance, because they had copper, they could produce steam. Everyone knows how to light a fire, right? For at least a while. You could produce the steam. That could be enough pressure in a vessel to produce a wind hex system. And then you could actually produce soil, so you could create arable land in the desert. I mean, the potentials with it, because like arable land is just like calcium carbonate and minerals and sand, but not sand. Like you don't want a big lump of quartz, do you? You want it to be fine sand, like somewhere between some sand and some clay-sized particles of sand, right? It's about getting the right mix.
A geopolymer, we want fairly small particles that are going to fairly well cohere with each other so that we can formulate whatever properties we want. We want the piezoelectricity.
It will be obvious. It will be obvious how you make the Tiwanaku and the Sichuan or whatever it's called. That one's a limestone, and it will be obvious how you make the geopolymers from the basalt, because and there's this thing in Tiwanaku where they're saying like, there's this magnetic component. Well, if you look at the air grinder, they're saying when you use the air grinder with things that can become magnetic or can hold some sort of magnetic charge, the metals become more magnetic. And so if you had this and you put this into a mold, then you would potentially have these magnetic anomalies on the H blocks that are formed that have been found on the H blocks.
Exactly. And if they used any kind of cluster technology whatsoever, they would end up with these dark evos still stuck in that thing for who knows an indefinite period of time.
Absolutely. I'm not discounting the fact that you can't move things like the ancients said in Nan Madol using Evo cluster boundary layer on the basalt columns and moving them as the ancients said there. And once it's charged for a period of time, it holds its charge for up to 2 days, in fact, of these magnetic charges. So you could have a simple tool where these things would still be weightless. But for building many megalithic structures, you wouldn't necessarily want to go down that route.
So right before we went live, Terran Earthling was showing some of these geopolymer brick batteries and stuff like that. Do you think that that's potentially what these ancient structure technologies were? Like, is there practical energy storage within the architecture and design?
So here's the thing. I had the opportunity to go to Cairo on the 26th of December 2021, right? And I'm seeing these things and I'm thinking, well, these things could actually be made quite relatively easily, but you would have to make basically some kind of cement. So I have that in my head. So to do that, you need to grind this stuff up. So now we have a solution that fits the auspicious symbol that's been seen all around the world, right? And so it has to have been a knowledge, and the anti-gravity comes out of this. It's the same thing. The materials processing, all of these things. It's one simple technology. It's just lit, and it's in everything you see. It's just such a joke. It's in your faces. It's in it's in the Christian church design. It's in like every symbol of power, like the Maltese cross and the fleur de lis.
All sacred geometry, pretty much. It's
all sacred geometry. All sacred geometry. I said in 2018, I said, when it finally happens, it'll just seem like such a joke because they've been dangling it in our faces for thousands of years. I was this show, right? Yeah.
It's like the dam just broke, and everybody all over the place online from every different section and completely non-communicating channels having nothing to do with each other ever in their history are suddenly talking about the exact same things. Why are pyramids huge right now? Why is everybody looking at the possibility of crystallized technology and using new power generation factors? Where are we looking at these strange...
The understanding of geopolymer as well.
The entire world is on this now. And it's like all of a sudden...
Do you understand what this means?
Everything changed.
Most normal people don't live in glass and steel buildings. No. They're the banks and the pharmaceutical companies, right? Most people live in a few story high building, okay, in most parts of the world, maybe not more than 5, okay. The idea that you can build extremely strong buildings very sustainably by taking stuff and just reforming it into something else is transformational for human habitation as well. I see this documentary the other day about these thousands and thousands of people that are in debt slavery firing bricks in Pakistan, and they're earning like $1.30 a day, and they have to make several thousand bricks, and from the age of about 7, and they're totally backbreaking, dust in their faces. All of that's unnecessary with this technology. So it's transformational in soil, it's transformational in energy and transportation, all of these factors. And I was with Show's friend came over the other day, and I was talking about something about the Sumerian god with every single part of those stelae that's in the British Museum. It has these symbols which they're not just on there for decoration, like a typical museum would say, oh, this is a nice decorative element of a flower like that. No, every symbol on that stele is a symbol of power, very deliberately put on that carving.
Yes, diagrams, right? Encoded knowledge, high-tech encoded energy knowledge. And
the one I'm referring to is on his wrist. And it looks a bit like a wristwatch, and even some people have said that, but it's actually more like a chrysanthemum. When I was showing that to Show here a few years ago, because I was talking about the fractal structure of the exotic vacuum object, and I believe it's a representation of that. Yeah. Show said, well, this looks like the symbol that's on the front of the Japanese passport. And I didn't know until I was recounting this to Show's friend yesterday. Was it yesterday?
Yesterday.
No, yesterday. And when they went out to dinner, I thought, well, he said, oh, this is actually the symbol of the Emperor of Japan. So I then went on to find out a bit more about that. And it turns out they've got these symbols of regalia, right? 3 items that have been passed down, and you literally cannot believe this, since the first emperor was assigned to be the leader of Japan in his heavenly station. He was given these 3 holy objects as he descended to Earth to manage the literally freaking alien. And when you look at them, they are exactly the sacred geometry. I'm not kidding you. Exactly what I've been showing people. It's not even slightly not that. It's exactly that.
I look forward to your episode.
Sometimes it's so in your face, there's no more denying it anymore.
It's been hidden in plain sight. It's literally everywhere. And okay, so it's looking with new eyes, and that's a new theme. Michelle Gibson, a fellow researcher, really good work that she's been coming up with.
That is why I went to Delphi. I had to go to Delphi because I looked at Tesla, and I followed his father was a priest, and the knowledge was given to the priesthood around the world to carry forward, as long also the Masons. And then I followed his bloodline, and it came back to the culture, the Hellenic culture. And I found some symbology on coins, and I thought, oh, that's it. I've just got to go to Delphi. What will come out of this story? It will totally blow your mind. Delphi was the place where all of the ancients went to learn about all of the secrets. And I have to get on the bus now, so I'm going to say goodbye.
Okay,
oh, man. Will, it's great to have you.
Thank you so much, Martin Fleischman.
Have a great day, Bob.
Project.
Catch you later, mate. Bye-bye.
Epic work. And we will be checking it out.
Okay, well, I can't follow. I can't follow that up. I mean,
yes,
how can you follow that up?
Yes, you can, because you're Tim Ventura. You are the man.
I can't follow that.
The legend. You are so much. And for anybody who hasn't been following Tim's epic work lately with the keeping up with the UAPs and the disclosures, the balloons, the fact that the reporting of the ones in Alaska and Yukon or whatever, Northwest Territories, Canada, that they were cylindrical, they still haven't been recovered. And now apparently today there's more balloons coming up in the news again.
What are they back? The balloons are back?
So I saw Dabu 7 of the conspiracy YouTube mentioning that there was
the other thing is so next week let me see, I think Sean Kirkpatrick is going to be giving he is going to be giving a briefing right in Washington DC. I think that's on the 19th. So you know, so there may be some more news items as well. They've been tasked with, right, as you guys know, this was in the NDA 2023. They're tasked with basically looking back to, I think, 1945 to see what kind of UAP data might be there. Now, what is interesting, I have this coming up as an interview. This is on Monday. So just kind of stay tuned, right? And I will post this on my channel. I'm going to be talking with an Air Force fellow who basically went through the classified archives, and he was looking for UFO data. And so, I mean, just to kind of give you, I mean, I can tell you in advance what it's about, right? But
yes, please, just a little spoiler, not
okay, well, yeah, so,
a teaser, right?
Yeah, well, it won't even be a teaser. I mean, I can't say exactly what he'll say, right? So I would say, you know, definitely tune in, right? That's you just look up Tim Ventura interviews, right? And it's there on YouTube.
Yes, I will pull up your channel right now, actually.
But yeah, so basically, the long and the short of it is, you know, I do a lot of defense coverage, and this is an Air Force contact. One thing, this probably shouldn't surprise anyone, is members of the United States military are giant UAP advocates, but there's been a long-term stigma, right? And so they don't talk out about it, and so that's starting to change, I guess. But not surprisingly, there are a lot of people out there who have served in the United States military who just don't talk about these subjects if they're in a sensitive position. And this individual has kind of been one of them. And now that he's retired, he can talk about it. So he basically was trying to verify just for himself the Robert Hastings UFOs and Nukes book, which surprised me, actually. I didn't realize it was that widely read. And so what he did was he went through the Air Force archives, and he went through several different archival areas, I guess. And a lot of this was classified top secret stuff from way back when. And so I asked him, well, you know, what did you find? And what he said was he did not find any smoking gun stuff, right? He didn't find any conspiracy theory type stuff. He didn't find any of that, even in the classified archives. He said none of that was there. But what he did find was detailed reports, lots and lots and lots of detailed reports about many of these encounters that were in the Hastings book. And so for anybody who's interested, that UFOs and Nukes, basically the military's own records confirm most of what's in that.
Right. So the records of the nukes and the UFOs appearing and interfering, you're saying that they found those records and that those.
Yeah. And so the things, basically the things that Hastings was reporting on, you know, this is what he told me is the things that that Hastings was reporting on. A lot of these stories, like Malmstrom, right? Now, in that particular case, and again, so I believe Malmstrom was the one where the UAP or the UFO was supposed to shut down the nuke site. And in that particular case, one of the things that he said to me was, he said that was not a UFO. If I remember right, he said that they were having all sorts of control problems before and after that event. And so in that one, I guess it got chalked up to UFO, right? Because of, you know, the people who were there reporting it and stuff like that. But he said that this was like a long-term ongoing issue with just crappy equipment, I guess. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. You know, I mean, I've got my series of questions that I'll kind of run them through and all that kind of stuff. But what he did say to me, that one of the things that stuck with me was, he said, basically the history of UFOs is the history of the U.S. military, right? Because so many of these encounters have happened with military personnel and been recorded by military personnel. And so even without getting into any kind of conspiracy theories or anything like that, this is something that the U.S. military has been reporting and documenting for a long time. And from everything I've seen, they just don't know what to do with it, right? And that's okay. I mean, you know, who would?
They don't want to admit that they're powerless and like lose control of the narrative and just the I guess power that comes with the reassurance of the overall supreme power.
You know, it's so hard to tell what actually happened, right? And that's why you have all these back and forths about, you know, like, is there or is there not something that crashed? Is there or is there not something that's stored somewhere, you know? And then you've got like 100 different people and they're all telling completely different stories. And, and then one of the other things that I've seen is I'm not to name names, but there have been a few of these stories that have been pretty discredited. And yet the people who tell those stories keep coming up again and again and again and again. It's like, okay, well, wait a minute. That this person is kind of making up a story, and yet you're passing information along from it.
And why are they always given the microphone and the camera on the news channels?
Yeah. So it's a complicated issue. I mean, in a weird way though, for me, the UAP thing is almost, it seems like it's a new opportunity to learn, and it doesn't really seem like anything is standing in the way. I guess what was it? Somebody said, never attribute to conspiracy what incompetence can explain. And I was like, yep, that's kind of where things are at.
Right?
Man, those are some wise words, dude.
Yeah. It's like, okay, so it's not necessarily being suppressed. There's just a whole lot of ignorance happening, Okay,
right.
well,
don't incite woo-woo when you have a factual explanation.
And
integrate yourself into that mix.
Well, and what Bob was just saying about like those giant megalithic stones, right? And that's what would be used for grinding down at the quarries, the different basalt or sandstones and limestones and everything, and then taken and rebuilt as geopolymers into those 1,000-ton megalithic bricks. It's the most simplest way, and it actually makes sense, but it's a bit of a higher technology than we use ourselves in our own building today, but at the same time, it's simplistic, easy means. So, like,
well, yeah, I mean, what was it? Several thousand years ago, right? Well, not several thousand, over 1,000 years ago, there were plenty of types of concrete using volcanic soil, and it was primarily the elements in the volcanic soil that acted as a better binder. But that concrete is significantly stronger. It's pH balanced. It tends not to leach over time, which means that 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years after the construction is built, their geopolymer is still standing tall, whereas normal concrete, like look at the Chinese concrete disaster, they built and used some of the cheapest materials possible with a completely unformulated mixture. They just threw a bunch of crap into a hopper, ground it up, and now their buildings are falling apart after only 10 years, literally crumbling. 10 years.
I just saw something online. I'm not sure if you guys are talking about this or if this is something else, but this was about Roman concrete, and they were saying that they put chunks of lime in there that weren't mixed, and the long and the short of it was, for a long time they thought that this was like a manufacturing defect or something, and this article was saying no, that they did this on purpose, and actually the reason that they did it was it forms self-healing concrete.
Exactly, and look at the cracks. White limestone lines that have healed themselves.
Keeps the chemical reaction going within it. That's ingenious, right?
Yeah. And so they were saying that basically if it cracks, right, like because they've got this
seawater comes in and then
it comes into the crack and then it reacts and then it heals itself because this chemistry isn't completed in it, right? And they were saying that modern concrete, because you mix it really well and the mixture is it's very homogenized, right? And so once it's done, that's it. And if it cracks, you're out of luck. And what they're saying with this Roman one was they had these chunks of like basically uncatalyzed, I think it was limestone aggregate or something like that, and that basically if it cracks, then water gets in and it will heal itself. Because
all the old buildings that they built that didn't survive, that didn't use this kind of concrete, well, we don't get to study them, right? So we only see the ones that survived.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point.
Right, yeah, basically adding a little calcium hydroxide in the form of chunks into your concrete will offer it the same capability. And I understand they were real proud of themselves at a couple of universities for creating a bacteria that they could inject into the room temperature cast concrete mix that would end up doing the same sort of thing and producing byproducts that would repair the concrete. But the Romans had this stuff figured out a long time ago, and they didn't need to formulate a magical biolab in order to do this. They just dug chunks of uncatalyzed material in and called it a day, and it's still working. But also, there was a number of things in volcanic ash that were prevalent around Greece and around Rome that quite available in terms of building materials, significantly strengthened it. And this I had papers on years ago. I have no idea if they're still available now or if they've been pulled, but I haven't seen much on the actual metallurgy, the materials used, anything else involved in it. But I wanted to mention this about ancient kemet too, since Bob brought it up and talking about these geopolymer stones. Hemp is a material that has some really interesting properties, particularly hemp stalks. You can make hemp rope out of it. Obviously, there's 1,000,000,001 hemp products because of its very fibrous striation grain. But one of the things that people might not recognize is you can burn hemp rope or hemp cord if you do spin it in out of the plants, and when you burn it, it'll form on its own function graphene nanotubes, which are insanely strong. So we have found graphene nanotubes in Aswan granite, and I find that particularly fascinating because the amount of strength that it would act like a miniature rebar throughout the entire structure, in the same way that we use fiberglass to bind something that's way less strong, which is epoxy. The fiberglass is the strength, and the epoxy simply keeps it rigid. And in this case, the graphene nanotubes from burned hemp materials would add that strength, and then the rigidity, the body of it, would just be the geopolymer. There's so many little tricks like that all added together, you end up with a stone that can survive.
That's like just so fascinating to me. And with my own electrolysis, alchemy, nanotube grow stuff that grows out of these things, I'm just trying to bring up another camera now that we have room to show exactly what you're talking about a little bit.
I find it interesting too how we do end up seeing consciousness pop up again and again and again as a main topic. Now, personally, that's not my area of focus. I do pay attention to it, but it seems prolific to the point where it's almost unavoidable with it coming up in topic or in conversation at some point during every single call. And so why? I mean, what really is happening that the human mind is beginning to understand its connection with the universe? Is it some kind of mass phenomena where simply people are putting this information together and seeing it happen again and again? Is it the algorithm feeding us information to tell us to look here because this is becoming a trend? I mean, what is it? But it's everywhere now.
The
question, what territory are we moving forward into if the CIA, last year did a big archive release on consciousness, parapsychology, remote viewing? I believe it was called the Crest Archive. Some of you may be familiar with. A whole treasure trove of information like officially disclosed from the CIA. You can actually go to their website and look up the information that they have on remote viewing, parapsychology.
Yes, it is freely downloadable. I will mention, of course, I save every IP address.
It's right off the website. They'll just give you the
there.
PDF right off the website, and there's a whole bunch of them.
Well, and again, I mean, for me, going back to the Global Consciousness Project, one of the interesting things about that is the data, right? And like, there are, I mean, I would say that all of us as human beings have had these experiences. That's part of our heritage, right? Being human. But for thousands and thousands of years, there's been really no way to kind of dig past a certain depth. And my hope is that, like, by looking at data, maybe that will pull out stuff that will help us to understand better what's going on. I don't know. It seems like that's something new. You know what I mean? Whereas everything else, I mean, there's this long cultural history of these abilities, but I think what we know is these experiences happen to people every now and then, and most of us can't control it, right? My own family's that way. It's like you have the dream comes true. Okay, well, what does that mean? You can't control it, you can't predict it, it just happens, and then it's done. It's like, well, why? And maybe by using these new data tools, maybe we can start to understand more about what's going on specifically, and then maybe that will help people to understand it, control it better.
Hey, Tim, let me ask you a question. If you've heard this same trend, because this is something that for me personally has come up at least 6 different sources who I all consider credible, and they've come to this conclusion on their own. I have private conversations with them. They don't talk to each other. At least they didn't before we kind of all brought everyone together. over the last 6 months, particularly. We brought these 6 different people together, but they keep on with this idea that under intense field excitation of the types of strange fields that produce the anti-gravitational effects, or the parts cooling during operation, or the over unity results, that something really weird happens with the humans that are experiencing said field coming off these devices. And they all report telekinetic or telepathic-like phenomena happening frequently, along with a variety of strange physical phenomena and manifestations of things moving on their own and charges accumulating, exactly like what you've seen with the lifters years ago. And you know this fully well. If you run a stream of ions in one particular spot in the room from one point to another, say coming off of a corona wire and coming to a collector plate, that it leaves something left over in the signature of time itself, in that space-time matrix surrounding all that matter. Like you run it in your garage, the earth is rotating, and for some reason this tracks along with the rotation in that exact spot with that exact surrounding matter. In that same spot in the garage, you're going to find weird temporal displacement. And even a day or two later, things will still be charged, things will recharge themselves, you'll have unusual anomalies, and stopwatches may run at different paces, which we've already verified. Even my laser interferometer has shown that something as simple as a lifter cell placed in the beam path, where between the ionization wire and the collector plate, a beam passed in that zone will displace itself by several fringes to a significant degree. I've gotten over 25 fringes with that setup so far, and it continues to accumulate over time. It doesn't happen instantly. It's not a heat phenomena. I've gotten thermocouples all over that thing. I've checked it with infrared. It's not a heat phenomena. It's not just simply an atmospheric displacement phenomena. It does something to time in the space where it sits and operates. And I think we're seeing these effects through and through, but I believe that that time effect, that temporal field, has something to do with consciousness. And it seems that from 6 different sources, they say when you run these machines, the link between different consciousness from different people will become strengthened, and the influence of consciousness over this physical reality becomes visceral. Have you heard that?
I haven't heard that. I've been pulling a kind of a different thread lately. Well, let me put this out there, and this is the one where I talk about it, and people, they're like, well, maybe, maybe not. But so one of the things that got me was this idea that the human mind, right, or the mammal mind has been evolving for hundreds of millions of years, right? I mean, originally we came out of dinosaurs way back when, and so our nervous system has been evolving for hundreds of millions of years, if not longer. And only the last 130 to 150,000 of those have we used any kind of language. And complex language has only been like the last 5,000 or something, right?
So I have to interject, Tim, that there seems to be a possibility of older languages in a lot of these golden tablets and new runes coming out that seem to be a Proto-Sumerian, but also Proto-Sanskrit, and this pictographic symbol language. And then I bring back the story of the Tower of Babel moment and this one world language that's possibly with connected to the legends of Atlantis, and now the Younger Dryas catastrophe event, Graham Hancock's work and everything, showing these Randall Carlsons and whatnot, that potentially some of this biblical scripture and both religious texts and legends could be more true, and that if there was this past golden age of Atlantis or Lemuria or whatnot, and connecting back to consciousness and synchronicity, a golden age, maybe it was this telepathic language, and thus there was no need for it.
Yeah, and actually that's you're kind of on the same kind of similar path to what I've been kind of brainstorming, right? Which is the language as we know it, as we speak it, as we think it, right? I mean, this starts in childhood. I mean, you learn language, you start to, people are using very simple words by the time they're 1, right? So it's one of those things that's just, it's so much a part of us that it can't not be a part of us. But that's not the way that our brain evolved to work. Our brain evolved to work more visually, right? And so language is it's very good. It has precision. You know, I mean, there's some really good things about it, but then there are some really bad things too. Like, I mean, basically, we reduce reality to concepts. You know, and it's like they say that, you know, the map is not the territory. And so one of the problems is that we have a box for all these little concepts, right? Like, okay, this is an apple, and this is a car, you know, and in reality, you know, what you're talking about never fits that exactly, you know. And so part of the issue is simply that. But then the other issue too is, you know, I mean, if the brain evolved to operate like at a, you know, a high level, it's almost like you've got this Formula One race car and you're forcing it to run on kerosene or something instead of gas, right? Because, you know, you're saying, okay, well, you know, we've got language, which is this new thing, which our brain isn't really that good at. And it's got all these limitations, and, you know, and the brain is capable of so much more. But the problem is, how do you think without language, right? And animals do that. You know, and people have responded, right. Like people have told me, they've said, well,
complexly, like I have to just bring up a story that stuck with me my entire life. From when I was younger, I had a bunch of pet reptiles, some chameleons and stuff, and that putting crickets into one of their terrariums, and that one time I was watching, I dumped a couple new ones in, and I noticed that a couple had been remained, and they burrowed into the moss, and they came up, and that they like chirped at the other ones chirped, and that there had also been a remaining waxworm that was alive, and that the new ones and the other two that were hidden all came out and attacked and ate the waxworm all at once. And it's like, how did these bug insects be able to do this social complex attack, you know, and all this stuff? And there's so much more complexity into both consciousness, the energy waves.
There's a lot. I mean, yeah, we and you know, then this other, and I think somebody had told me this, but this idea of maybe like when you look at these great prophets, right, like Jesus and Buddha and Muhammad, and, you know, all of these great prophets, like this person had suggested that all of them basically meditated in one way or another, and they basically got this divination, this wisdom in this realm beyond language, right?
Connecting to source, this,
you know, like
download of consciousness.
Yeah, and
occult, esoteric, they say the Christ consciousness.
But what's interesting is one of the things that a lot of these prophets have said is, like, you know, even in the Bible, right? They basically say in different ways, they try and say, look, don't try and guess what this is, because it's not like that, right? And all of them have said something like that, like, I can't explain this, it just is, so you have to accept it, right? So they tell that to their followers, and then the followers basically say, okay, well, this is what he meant. They write it down in a book, and then they kill each other for millennia, right? And but like
so the story goes.
Yeah, and so it's like, what if that experience, you know, and maybe this goes to what you're talking about and what Jeremiah was talking about. What if this experience is like the brain operating the way that it's supposed to, and that is how we connect to whatever else is out there? And the problem is, because it's beyond language, you literally can't explain it to people. They have to experience it.
Yeah, right. So now that you bring that up, it brings back memories and connections to this, like the tongues, or people like actually looking like they're insane, but it's demented, and they're getting this connection of this linguistical experience of conscious understanding and wave connection, or whatever it is that they're connecting to and experiencing, but that it's impossible for them to then translate it while from their experience and connection to it into another being or person or legible, understandable language expressed in our three-dimensional experience.
The best you can do is convey it with language, and if the other person that is listening to you has experienced something similar enough, they will understand what it's like to be multiple people, multiple places, multiple things at one time when you're having a certain kind of experience. But when you say that straight up, it sounds crazy.
So that is essentially quantum consciousness, though, where your consciousness is being experienced in multiple moments of time, space simultaneously, and that also these other body experiences, such as astral projecting, such as like meditating and getting to source, the silence, whatnot, your higher self, remote viewing being the other, as well as lucid dreaming too, right? Connecting to these different realms. And then finally the going the DMT or the psychedelic, the ritual of the shamanic and the different gateways to this other conscious spiritual realm of existence.
Right. Well, what's really fascinating is the integration of technology. So an ayahuasca journey will certainly get you to a different state of consciousness and a completely different way of thinking that cannot really be synthesized or stimulated by any other mechanism, right? But also there are...
Sorry, Jeremiah, before you continue, that drugs, the psychedelic experience specifically deals with alchemical spirituality of the interaction of the plant spirit giving you its experience of the crossover to that realm. It's not pure that you attain from that self meditation and being in your self balance and getting that direct connection.
Well, it's not really a self balance, right, Bernie? Because it's a neurochemical thing. We have a physical
many
chemical.
ways to adjust that neurochemistry and access that state. You don't necessarily need to be in a psychedelic state.
You don't need the drugs, right? That's what I'm saying. That's why it would say like a ritual of a state of I can't term.
You could simply do transcranial magnetic stimulation or something like that.
This is what I wanted to tie in, though. The use of technology.
The person to that experience, that they experience crossing over to that other realm once, and then from that point forward, it's that the self-betterment of the person and to them to then attain that experience connection through themselves, not needing the drugs, is the higher point.
Some people are definitely going to be more easily able to do this kind of stuff, and I think investigating in ways that we can improve on that kind of ability is probably going to be a better use for
passage.
And some of this too. I mean, I don't know. One of the things that kind of gets me about this is like, again, all of us have had these experiences, but as you get older, you get more and more locked into kind of your normal mundane kind of thing. I mean, like in my case, I'm 47, and so it's like, I had these experiences in the past, like in college, stuff like that, but it's now today, it's like, man, I'm really locked into day.
So like,
you know what I mean? So
I do a once a year a psychedelic reset during the summer at some music festival, and it's just like one day once a year. That's it. It's like that's all that's needed. And once I have kids, I don't know if that'll continue, or maybe I might need the vacation. Who knows?
It changes when you have kids. It changes. That's why tonight, I told you, tonight's laundry night, right?
Right. Well, you're still looking good. Don't, even in a white shirt, even in the white t-shirt and scrubs, Tim is the man. Look at that.
Well, I actually, one of the things I want to do is probably
interviews on behind you, and right.
I want to fix up I want to kind of like build like a real studio, I guess.
You have a real studio, I guess. Just the door, I guess, is what you're saying.
Or something. Well, and then I got to fix the echo too. And I'll listen to this.
Get some carpet.
That's what I think I'm gonna do is get
the angle that you usually use, right? You can never see the behind you there, right? So you'd never.
Oh, I just close it. I close it with I have a drape. I mean, this is we moved during the pandemic, and so this was like an in-between house because in our area, in the Seattle area, I mean, prices just went like stupid high during the pandemic. You know, and
Still are.
so, yeah,
my little secret there, right? The live secrets, right? It's like, oh, we got the door. No, okay.
Secret entrance.
To look good and make it a studio. Lose access to the rest of the basement, and here we go.
And now we know how the sausage is made.
That's your secret layer with certain things hidden.
No, it's actually the analog archive storage. The art will change. We'll just say that is the current.
I just figured it was like the secret entrance to the world's largest grow operation, right?
Yeah.
One day soon, but not here. In a mountain somewhere. Maybe.
In a mountain somewhere.
Yeah. I say in a mountain. It might be on a mountain.
Hey, about studying that, nobody seems to. I'm not going to mention certain words, but one thing that I think we have to isolate is a lot of common ideas going around, and also like anytime when you get like the military involved, you know, leaks get out and people see that things are moving around. The news talks about it, and you know we need to find a way to isolate that. Or like even like I remember reading how people had been betting on some football game. They were betting against somebody, and then it got out, and it turns out that it was like finally, you know, it got back to the team after like hundreds of thousands of people knew about it.
Okay, and, I have a foolproof plan.
Like lotto numbers and everything.
You set up a game like War Thunder, but it's about UAPs and psychic phenomena. And then you're going to have people who work for the government who are like, oh, there's this argument about the game. And I can prove them wrong by leaking these documents.
Yeah,
and
there you go.
Win.
I think prepping for like PSYOP might be involved too.
Like that National Guard
thing
guy,
is,
right?
For like, I can't think of the name of the effect, but when ideas are spreading, for like, I can't think of the name of the effect, but when they talk about it, how like they had monkeys on an isolated island, how it spread.
The 13th monkey.
There's some name for an effect of it where these monkeys start using tools and then some other isolated music.
1300th monkey effect.
Yeah, that's it.
In Japan,
I was thinking for people that a lot of times you'll get similar ideas from seed ideas. Like, you know, let's say if you did electrolysis with water, and then, you know, you might have 100 other people saying, you know, well, what happens if we tried this, you know, to make aluminum or something like that, you know, because the first idea spawned all the other ideas.
And yes, you're bang on that, Anthony, and that's a very good point. And for those that don't know, it's called the 12th monkey effect. It had to do with some sort of macaques maybe or something in Japan on isolated islands where once a certain amount of the population of monkey on one island started to figure out how to use this tool that was taught to them by like a human, then magically monkeys in these other troops or whatever they're called on the other island started using it and doing it themselves too.
Yeah, I think that's supposed to be a real story.
Sounded great.
I'm pretty sure, like I'm 90, unless it's a Mandela effect.
Are you talking about the snow monkeys that use the hot springs?
Well, they use some kind of
no.
Other monkeys did in another area.
They also learned to use seawater to flavor their sweet potatoes that tourists give them.
I think that's what it was actually. Sweet potatoes. It might have to be.
I'm pretty sure it's like the same population of snow monkeys too, which is
another thing that might be good is putting people in isolation to
if it has to do
make
with
sure they're isolated.
Teaching them, then
for like 2 years straight with no chance of going outside to interact with people. Yeah.
Or if you've got like people that are on an island or something like that that don't have much outside communication, that would be great to study and compare to the rest of the population.
Yeah, and you can just study them through social media.
Have you heard of this? Wasn't there like Soviet or frickin' it was either Soviet or CIA experiments that were done after this, and that it was maybe in Germany or in Japan where they started doing like movie theater viewings or something like that, and they confirmed this monkey effect of like showing the people a small population of the people one thing, and then eventually the whole group of them knowing it or something. Have you ever heard of that?
I haven't heard of that one.
Okay.
Sort of the 100 monk theory.
Yeah, it sounds like a same story but different version of it.
Get passed around like that. Yes, sort of the 100 monk theory. You reach a pivot point and then.
Another thing I'm thinking.
Critical mass.
Yeah.
Maybe telepathy has gone down a lot because of all the electronic interference we have now.
Well, it could be interfering with it, right? For all we know,
that's what I'm thinking.
The satellites a couple generations ago could have cut it off, interfered with it. Is that why they make fun of aluminum hats for going insane? Does
but then I just
cage around your head?
I just read
that in the jar for he was right. If you know who I mean.
I just read something that it's possible that they actually focus the energy, so it would have the opposite effect. The aluminum foil hat makes it worse, not better.
Like an antenna.
You know what? It's
an antenna. Yeah.
Rim that works. That would work as a concave.
Just like the crown. So just like the crowns that are gold with the freaking gems on them that are crystal resin. That right on your crown.
That would make it concentrate like right about the center of the head, the pineal gland.
That's why those royals have those really expensive giant capacitor antennas on their heads, sitting on those thrones in those resonating chamber cathedral castles. Maybe
wouldn't that be funny? I thought they were crazy, but just they learned too much.
Giant cosmic satellite or radio antenna, energy antenna.
Well, I would agree with you about the Royals, but they are just not smart enough to really indicate to me, at least, that they're tuned into anything at all.
But I'm saying 200 years ago, where you look across Asia or even natives in South America and North America, everyone, they all have, Africa as well, they all have these crazy layered metal gemmed crowns.
Yeah, and then Jim Carrey just takes in all the information from everybody's brains. Yeah, and it's a terrible movie.
If we could look for these things like, 500 or 1,000 years ago before, back when the media didn't exist, and people didn't communicate so easily.
Someone quick, call John Titor. We need a time machine right now instead.
Definitely. Hey,
I've got the time machine tied up. I'm going back to. I'm already playing this out.
What year are you going to?
1987, 1980, because I think that's the best year of all time. Right?
You need to give me a note when I'm 1 year old.
1 year before the Olympics.
Because 86, you're in the. It wasn't quite there.
86, yet, I'm in the womb until May. So
yeah, and then by 1988, you're starting to push up against the 90s. I think 87 was the perfect year. So
perfect year for what?
Just time machines. Go back.
I think 1987 was the height. I think that was the height of American culture. I think it's been downhill ever since.
Honestly, you're not wrong. You're really not wrong.
You're seeing the height of. That's the interesting correlation. The height of the American culture was. Oh, and Grandmaster, I will send you the link now. Sorry, I forgot. But that the height of American civilization was right before the fall of the Soviet Union. So they needed that competition, the back and forth, just opposite power to keep it in check. Essentially,
you could call it a foil.
I don't know. Tim's got a point there, because if you think about it, everything was sort of united in these various organized fronts, and at that time people were actually kind of chill. Major stuff was happening. The entire culture was sort of reforming, and it was doing so organically without major violent outbursts and all kinds of crazy fear tactics and everything else. It was just simply recoalescing into something brand new that it hadn't been before. And so it's funny, because I grew up, I was born in 86, and I grew up watching shows in the mid and late 90s that came from the late 80s, because they were still the best things they could put on television, just due to the artistic and expressive attributes of that time and that generation. And so there is something that was truly lost in that era, which nostalgically we still sort of long for.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so Black Monday was 1987. That was October 19th, 1987. So,
so right after I was born.
Lost
Sorry,
or
everybody.
taken
Is that
away.
where the financial crashes?
so you push too far into the 80s, right? You get into 1988, and they start to. They were starting to realize things like maybe spending money that we don't have by running up the deficit. Maybe that's not a good thing, right? But you
I
get
guess we
back
forgot
earlier
along the lines.
yeah, and like in the that 86, 87 time frame, and they're like, oh yeah, they know it's gonna work great. We just invent the money, So
Yeah,
I don't know.
Actually,
I did the .com thing in Redmond too, and that was one of those really special like times and places to be
in American history. Yeah, right. Yeah, no, and you're out there like in the heart of it too, right? Like
it was just like I remember I was working on I was working on AT&T's fixed wireless project, which was like the world's worst kept secret project, right? But it was basically like by today's standards, it was totally antiquated. The idea was fixed wireless is basically like a cell phone on the side of your house for super high bandwidth, and they could eliminate the last mile of cable, right? And so the very short version is they decided that they were going to they got into the game late for the .com thing, and they wanted to make up for lost mileage by spending their way out of it. So the project I was on had like tons of money and very poor oversight, but that was normal for that time. And like in Redmond and also in Silicon Valley and all that, you had just like stupid amounts of money, and they were throwing money at people. Anybody who had like a tech idea, they were throwing money at them.
And it was
people
real money back then. It was cash back then. Right?
Yeah, and they had the people giving them money didn't really know what it was for. They're like, okay, you can use this to make a computer thing, and it's going to make everybody rich. And that was all they knew. And they're like, here, take $10 million and do something with it. Or
so
take
the more
40
things
million.
change, the more they
Go
stay
back
the
and buy
same.
Microsoft stock.
But like, yeah, so it was at that, and this was again for my story, it was like when I went there, I did write a big blog about this. I could write a book. I probably should someday. But
start blogging it and then turn it into a book.
It's like the thing that got me about it was it's like, okay, you take a job and you move to a city, and in my case, it wasn't even that far away. It was, but you take a job and you move to the area, and like as you kind of get into it, you start to realize it's almost like that. We're not in Kansas anymore, right? Like, and it's just weird little, stupid stuff like that. But the thing that got me about that was it was the time and the place that was special. And actually, that's one of the reasons that I want to go down. This is on my list. If I get to do this, I'll be really excited. I want to go down to San Francisco and interview some of these consciousness people, because they had that same experience, right? Like,
or maybe do it through StreamYard or Zoom instead, because we don't want you to end up like the Cash App guy, because I hear those streets are rough these days.
Oh, well, I don't know.
Stay safe, Tim. You are a
just for the
international legend and necessity, and
I think it would be interesting. It was like, from what I understand, it was like it was a time and it was a place. And I know that sounds stupid, but like it was really special because of the people and the community. You
like
had
Hollywood, like 80 or 100 years ago, sort of thing, like in the
kind of yeah. And
so the question that's on anybody's mind who's seriously thinking about this whole, can you go back to the late 1980s? The question they're wondering is probably the same one that we all have to ask ourselves morally, which is, do I take a known winning ticket number, lottery number, race, or some other gambling thing back to the 1980s with the knowledge of exactly what the outcome is and make myself rich in the future? Would you do it or would you not? Are you responsible, and do you obey the temporal directive of Star Trek, or do you just decide to make yourself profit?
There's so many different. You're talking about the whole idea of a paradox, right? And there are so many different interpretations of that. I mean, I've seen scientists who say, oh, absolutely, it could never happen. That's why time travel will never be invented, because a paradox would happen, and therefore it can't. And then I've seen other scientists who have said, you know what, it would be it would just create a new timeline, and it wouldn't change anything. So in their view, yeah, take the winning lottery number back, and you'll change reality. But the thing is that since reality is changed, no one would know. And so,
right. Is it the many worlds theorem, or is it something else?
The multiverse, right? Like,
yeah,
the fractal slide each
Like time is full of branches shooting off from it.
No, hold it. I think
think
what the most interesting question is what happens when a paradox happens, like you kill your father before you're born. Before you're conceived.
Well, so like if I remember right, in many worlds, the idea is basically it would catapult you into a different timeline, and so you could.
Exactly,
so you could go back and kill your father, and he would never be born.
Right, because he's not really your grandfather. He's actually, a different grandfather of a likeness.
Consciousness still experiencing it, or just like go into nothingness. It would just frack. I see exactly what you're saying. Yeah,
that's why I always thought was the most interesting part, though, for that enables or disables it even being possible.
But okay, then there's
how
another.
Big is the paradox, right? So think of one dimension has to be like the simulation or the code or the matrix, whatever it is, so that if you're running a simulation, that you got an error code, does it just continue to a reboot to another like slide over that's working, or does it crash the entire existence of the universe because you've created a hole within the fabric that's sucking everything in, or something like that, right?
Another thing, maybe just let's say you go back and kill your father, maybe then you just
Anthony.
That one's tough.
Tim, you're so patient. Please go ahead.
Another one that I heard, and this was again, I'm not going to use these names on air, right? Because we're going on YouTube, so we got to be careful.
We are on air right now.
But this was it, and I somebody had talked about this. They said, what if you wanted to go back in time and kill, we'll just say a well-known political leader in 1930s Germany, right? Which many people would want to do. And so again, this is a paradox situation, because if you went back and you assassinated that person, that person would never have been famous to need to be assassinated in the first place, right? And so it kind of creates a paradox, but then the person that was talking about this they said the other thing to look at is that again, this particular leader didn't come out of nowhere. They were a product of their time and that political environment. And so let's say
society was desperate for some kind of
solution. Exactly. And so if you
like they had just been taken advantage of,
the spark,
they wanted somebody to stand behind it.
Exactly. And so if you went back and assassinated that particular person that like everybody doesn't want to have ever existed, exactly. And then history would be written differently. And so it could just be like this never-ending loop, right? Where it's like, okay, well, we got rid of that guy, and here's another one, and it's
one's going to pop up in the place. I mean, the environment was ripe. If it didn't happen that week and in that tavern, if it didn't happen that month, it would have. The environment was ripe for an uprising of that style. It was primed. Someone was going to rise.
One taking the spot of another. What is going on, Tim, with the current leaks of like this? Is it this 21-year-old National Guard dude that somehow has these like ridiculously high class, both like NATO, both like Pentagon briefing, like General Miley specific briefing?
So shouldn't this should be proof? This should be proof that there's no UFO conspiracy, because if again, like Junior Woodchuck National Guardsman has like the secret war strategy for Ukraine, then you would think that the UFO thing would have been leaked years ago.
So also like one was like spy cables on Mossad, letting Benjamin Netanyahu know that Mossad was working against him in a protest. Like that was one of these.
I think the safest assumption you can make is that everything is a psyop and it's all just to mess with your head.
Well, and then we still didn't find out who blew up Nord Stream, right? Remember that?
I think
doesn't really matter at this point who did
that. He leaked that like the gas.
And then the other thing that's interesting is because again, I'm doing these defense interviews. It's interesting who you talk to about like the Ukraine war. Like I've talked to some people who are like, the Russians are totally going to win. Like, and everybody is of course really serious with their opinions, right? But like I've talked to some people, and these are all credible analysts, who are like, yeah, the Russians are absolutely going to crush the Ukrainians. There's, it's a joke, right? The Ukrainians could never win, And then I've talked to other people who are like, no, the Russians are going to lose so badly that it will like literally destroy their country.
That sounds familiar.
So here's the thing: it's currently kind of at a stalemate, and it's that Russia destroyed the original Ukrainian army, but then NATO armed them again, and then they've since destroyed that army, and now they've re-armed them again. And that's why all of these all the Western armies are literally depleted of their own army materials now, vehicles and stocks, because
Russia's
they've
depleted
given
too.
Ukraine several armies and trained new armies of people that it's like now it's taken the toll on Russia too, because it's like they're not just fighting Ukraine, they're fighting all of NATO, and that now it's like they're going to be sending a whole another army at Russia, and there's this that's coming up. It could go either way. Like it will
like they always want wars.
And then on Twitter for a while at least, they were calling it World War III. And
it essentially is. It's scary.
It is, isn't it? I mean, it is. It's like,
oh yeah, nuts.
And then the other thing that gets me is, and again, I'm not an expert on this, but like normally, this is one of the things that kind of scares me is like, okay, with the proxy war, right? Which is basically what this is. With the proxy war, the whole idea is this plausible deniability. It's like,
right?
So like
MiGs where they dumped gas on the U.S. Hawk drone because they didn't fire something to take it down, but they leaked fuel on it and then hit it to ignite it to crash it and then recover it. So like,
it's plausible deniability. Yeah, or like,
right?
Okay, so like the best
China selling guns to Russia, for instance.
Or Russia training North Vietnamese advisors in Vietnam. So we were fighting the North Vietnamese, but the North Vietnamese were basically like trained and financed by Russia, right? And so it was a proxy war. It's like, and the flip side of that would be Afghanistan in the 80s. The Russians were fighting the Mujahideen, but we were giving them all the stuff. So they were really fighting us.
It's worse because you're actually fighting a proxy war against yourself because you have American soldiers who are going to China to train them on how to fly jets and
now it's no longer a proxy war between between Russia and the U.S. where neither of their forces are dying. Now it's a proxy war of the U.S. attacking Russia itself, soldiers on its land, where that's where the escalation risk is. It's no longer Russia also proxying. No, it's its own soldiers that's being attacked and on its borders. That is why it is essentially World War III could spiral at any point.
Well, the part that scares me is like the whole thing about a proxy war, and this is from my understanding at least, is the whole idea is it's like, okay, we're going to do something really bad to you, and it's underhanded and devious, and both sides have done this in the past, and then we're going to pretend like we're not doing it, right? And so you can't actually call us on it. But in this case, like in Ukraine, we're just like, we don't like you, Russia, so we're going to give tons of weapons to them, and but that's not us, but it's like totally us, right? So then I'm like, well, wait a minute, I don't know. It just seems like really dangerous,
And even this,
and Trump saying he would, with 24 hours of getting reelected, he would end the Ukraine war, and then they bringing these false trumped up charges on him. Did they arrest him, try to disqualify him because he was the president candidate of peace, potentially of bringing us away from this World War III?
Yeah, they get him on the weird stuff too with Trump. I mean, the thing that gets me is like with Trump, what was it? He like bribing a porn star for silence.
Right, exactly. Stormy
like,
Daniels. The storm has come.
Yeah, but then the part that gets me is like that's totally within character for him. Like that doesn't surprise me. I'm not like
that shows how little they actually have.
He doesn't exactly sell himself as the family man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm not like
No, he wasn't. The same for Clinton and all the others, but why did they go for them?
I just quickly wanted to show Grandmaster, you got quite the quartz levitating there by what?
Dude, it's a heavy load, man. I'm telling you.
That is pretty. Like before you had papers, now you got quartz. on two magnets.
Yeah, it's really heavy.
Doing that. What you got going? Is that suspended or is that an actual magnet? Magnetic repulsion force.
Yeah, this is actual digital magnetic levitation module.
Digital, so it's not real.
Yeah,
that's the one where so the transistor adjusts the magnetic field, right, to keep it stable.
Electromagnets.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's like electromagnets tied to the Hall sensor, and they all like turn on and off and like change polarities like really quickly, so it just like stabilizes it.
Yeah. And so it's actually it's dynamically unstable. It's actually shaking really fast, but it's like it's all happening so fast you can't see it.
It's really stable though. It's super stable. It's amazing. Yeah, and it's a huge load, man. That's like a lot of quartz.
Wow, man, that was freaking awesome. I mean, that was a really dope looking display. I loved the laser. I was just sitting there staring at that center panel. I'm like, okay, I'm glad he's in the center, not off to the side, because that actually looked pretty darn cool with the laser.
Heck yeah, bro. You gotta get one, Jeremiah.
The laser printers. Here's one of the parts that's from laser printers. The inside.
You're saying don't throw the broken laser printers away. We got to
figure out a wire. Yep.
Parts, right?
So what Anthony's got there, he's showing the silver mirror part. So this is the optical capture part, and this is part of the that looks like a scanner. Is that right?
The bottom through the lenses, and then it reflects through here, and then it aimed down. That's the paper.
Yeah, that's the scan head, right?
This is it scans the beam onto the paper.
Oh, I know which one you got. Now I recognize it. Yeah, inside that thing, that black cap, you have a little rotor. You have a rotor that's made of aluminum with polished faces, and then on the left side there, the brass part, that's your laser. It hits the rotor. It goes through the curved lens. It hits the 45-degree mirror. It comes up from that, bounces off. The captured light hits that second mirror, comes back, and hits the CCD.
Right.
Okay. So that's
amazing piece of engineering.
So that's a lot of useful things for like home science experiments. You get some lasers, some mirrors, some magnets all out of it when salvaging.
Yeah, the best parts actually aren't that. They're the circuit boards.
Here's where you can find front surface mirrors instead of the regular mirrors, so you can get a much cleaner beam coming back.
Yeah, I have a laser level that's like that too.
See, that's what they're called, front surface mirrors. I don't know if you can tell.
Yeah, technically first surface mirrors, right? So yeah, first surface mirrors are in laser printers, and they're a fantastic source. My laser interferometer uses a series of first surface mirrors to redirect the beam path, and the expanding lens out of there is actually directly the same expanding lens inside of the capture CCD for that same device.
Yeah, they're in scanners, copiers too. I've got like 20 out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're awesome.
Guys, I have to bail out.
For sure, Tim. Understandable.
Yeah, hey, have a great evening, guys.
You to set up a couple of.
Good to see you, Tim. Have a great evening.
Yeah, let me know. Yeah, just shoot me an email, Bernie.
Yeah, I've got Nick Cook coming up next month that would do a great collab doing a consciousness talk, the three of us maybe, as well as having you on for another full Real Science episode in the next couple of Fridays or something like that.
Peace and love.
Perfect.
Oh, hey, if anybody wants a high-power laser, if we can keep it between us, these little Christmas lasers have 200 milliwatt diodes in them.
I ran in here to hear about Christmas lasers. Oh, man.
Yeah, I just got one out of the package, and shoot, I don't see the box, but the box that produces the stars all over them, I took that apart, and it's easily 200 milliwatts.
Now, if you want a high-power laser, buy the NUB M44 laser diode by Nietzsche, and it comes out of a Casio laser projector, and there you'll get a good 7 watts.
7? Oh.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it'll light wood on fire, no problem.
I was thinking that one that Pyro guy got had like 20 modules on it.
No, right. See, that's why I need to start using OBS, right? Like that's what you're running.
Say it one more time,
John. Right, like because you're able to switch from all camera angles.
Yeah.
Effects within it, right? That's
exactly. Yeah. I'm using OBS.
Gotcha. And you restreaming? Is anybody restreaming? You guys can all restream to your own channels. Y'all know, right? Just hit that share with your audience. You can go live on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitch, whatever you want. Link.
Oh, hey, here we go. If anybody wants to see it.
Oh, Oh,
This is
sorry, 1 sec. Yeah.
that's
What
the one
you
that's
got?
got the
Yeah.
200 milliwatt thing in it.
Oh, these freaking things. Yeah, I got several of those.
Has
That
both
I
the
want
red
to
and the
take
green
apart,
one in
use
it.
them too. Yeah, we're gonna do a whole weekend of
And
just
even
selling
better,
them.
$6.99 at the Goodwill.
Right, that's what it's about. We're gonna do take apart microwaves, some motors, some laser printers, and some lasers and LEDs.
Alternators.
I've heard there's some laser printers out there with green lasers in it, but I've never actually seen it. This guy that worked on some industrial versions, he said some had UV lasers in them. But we're talking about something that did like 300 pages a minute, and then, was like factory size.
Need me that OBS. All right, so we are 1 minute. Oh, Liminal got some real science to show off. All right. All right. Oh, and we got CJDV back. What up?
Yeah, Liminal, unmute yourself. What's that material that we're looking at again? That's a crystalline structure of natural geometry. You got to unmute.
I know the name of this stuff. Selenite.
Oh, you got to live from below.
Yeah, selenite. That's it.
How you doing?
Yeah, it's highly fiber optic. So she just kind of
cool.
hits it from the bottom, and you can see that when the beam's on the right side, it lights up that right side, and it's a striation type of material, and it grows. Rochelle salt grows kind of the same way that the selenite does.
Yeah, it's only people
called Rochelle?
I can remember it.
Well, the Rochelle salts that we showed earlier in the last stream grow in a very similar way to the selenite. It grows with striations or thin little lattice structures like this along the length.
What are you lighting it up with?
She's lighting it up with one of my custom RGBV lasers that I never talk about what's on the inside.
Yeah, they're so dope. He made these.
Oh, you have an RGB laser, dude?
Not an RGB, an RGBV. It's a 4-color.
It's
what is it, like 4.9 billion colors or something I can produce with it?
Right, and you sell them for how much exactly?
Oh, I never sell them.
I want one. Come on.
How strong can you make them?
That thing took me about 80 hours of work to manufacture. I am not going to sell them anytime soon. That was about years ago. I don't have time for it these days.
1,500, 2,000.
Dude, I want one for the aliens. I want to be like.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't sell them.
Who's got money? Put a price on it, and you got a good business because that's the next level.
What was the 7-watt laser you mentioned a minute ago? Was that out of used stuff, or was that a new one?
Which one? Oh, the laser interferometer?
No, the one you mentioned that was a 7-watt diode.
Oh, yeah, that's how to use it. That's how to use Casio projectors. You can get the diodes on eBay.
Oh, okay. What's
You need a driver, though. You need a driver to run them.
Oh, I can make a driver. That's no big deal.
No, you can't make a driver. You're not running in a freaking LM317 or something or an LM350BT to run this diode. 7 amp. It is like 7 or up to 7 amps, dude. You're not running that off of a.
No, that's no big deal. I can make a power supply.
Oh, you can make a power supply. Just if you wanted to put it into a laser pointer like what I have set up. Yeah, you're gonna want an actual dedicated driver, a micro buck module.
Thanks. Just wanted to show some fun.
I think my other one will keep me busy for now. I don't want to blind myself.
How strong is that laser?
Oh, sorry. That laser is a total of about 500, about 480 milliwatts out max, with the 4 colors combined.
Oh, okay.
I'm dumping a lot of the UV with the lenses inside because I couldn't find a dichroic that would perfectly mix the blue 400 and 445 nanometer diode, which is the M1, M01. Geez, I can't remember the freaking name of that diode now. It's another one by Nietzsche. Anyways, yeah, so it's got a blue diode, it's got a UV diode. I couldn't find a dichroic that would perfectly allow me to mix the blue and the UV and differentiate those two wavelengths between 405 nanometers and 445 nanometers. So I'm dumping like half of my UV and like 70% of my blue inside that chassis just to be able to get a proper color balance. So technically, I mean, it's capable of like 1.3 watts out. I'm not going to do that because it would be entirely blue all the time.
I'm just gonna run to the bathroom and for a smoke for a minute because it's 2 a.m. and this is the second
Yeah, you know, if you're gonna go do that, I think I'm gonna go ahead and do the same. And why don't you all chat amongst yourselves and
right? Yeah. Or is like there any last things anyone wants to discuss or go over? Should I maybe just end?
Yeah, pop the StreamYard back in there if CJDB has fallen asleep, which has happened before, poor fella. Then we can leave a slot for somebody else. You can always chime in to say, "Hey, I'm not sleeping. I'm listening, guys." But slot for someone.
Yeah, so covering anything else, showing anything else, or am I ending it and then doing it the privito? Right. And
hey, does anybody know a place to get the CoronaWire that's new? I don't want to get used, but is there any sources to find them new? I haven't been able to find them.
For which wire?
CoronaWire that puts out electrons or ions.
CoronaWire.
It just needs to be really thin, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you guys want to know what I use, the CoronaWire that's on there, Anthony, is about 16 times thicker than the one that I use.
The ones back in I had training for copiers. They mentioned that it's like a microscopically extremely rough surface. It's like really jagged.
Interesting.
And it's got a special
I want to get one of those underneath the microscope now. Huh.
All right, I'm going to end it here now. So much love, everyone. It was epic. We will keep the after party going, though. And I just posted the link in the live chat for everyone to join. But it will no longer be live. So if you want to hop in, Ross, feel free. And we will catch everyone on the next one. Epic random with Bob Greenyer and Tim Ventura. And make sure you catch out Bob's next level stream tomorrow live from Japan with Maximoto. It's gonna be wow. Just wow.
Was that the concrete?
No, that's it's an Evo reactor system.